Uh, for sight, we call it optical sensors. For hearing, we develop acoustic sensors, thermal sensors. They can be chemical, physical sensors, or probably gas or maybe chemical sensors. So this is not just a limited story behind sensors, but just to tell you that we engineer use slightly more technical terminologies, as all of you know. And to be able to develop one sensor, we have to do a lot of work, and which certainly can be available, can be make available on one of the shelves of such departmental stores. So, but a lot of work has been going on. I'm sure you must be hearing about sensors for quite some time and many decades. But what is new? What is something which is sort of intriguing all of us to develop new sensors? So one of the initial things, or one of the first things which we talk about, is the new fabrication schemes, new manufacturing schemes, which certainly bring the requirement and the necessity from the user at large to the scale, to the bench. To do that, one of the first things is the nanomaterials. Well, nanomaterial, the word nano is used everywhere, so I'm also using it to hear some of the admirations from you. But believe me, nanomaterials have dramatically changed the way we see the sensors today. The third thing is the mechanism. Because of the unique features of the sensors, we might have to integrate electrodes, some of the new integration schemes, some of the new circuitry, as these days even elementary school kids know how to use Arduino or Raspberry Pi and so on. So those very circuitry are something which is extremely important, required. And now the globe is changing because of these interesting three acronyms, which we all know these days: artificial intelligence, ML, or IoT. Some people say that ML and IoT are a part of AI, or some people say they are replaceable. So let's not really debate about it, but let's use them somehow. Okay, so this is something which people are using it for new smart sensors development and so on. So today I'm going to talk about some of the perspective of sensors. I'll talk about what is the unique sale proposition of the 3D printed sensors. How do we process them? I will not spend time on design because it is not a lab class per se, but certainly we can discuss later if required. I will spend some time on one case study, which is a viscosity meter, which we have tried to develop or various versions of it rather, and for various applications. And I will try to quickly summarize some of the other examples. And of course, I will summarize my whole session. So this is one particular viscometer which you see on top. So this is a simple viscometer, and I'll explain it further, which had a simple paper. Well, I'll start my demonstration. This is a simple paper device, which you can see here, although the electrodes are more of black color here, but in this case, they are more of transparent because we use a different kind of ink to create electrode zones. And interestingly, you can just switch in and out like a cartridge in a printer, and you can dispense your fluid from this particular point, and underneath is hidden the microcontrollers and so on and so forth. So within a matter of tens of seconds, you can get the answer of what kind of viscosity you're looking at. And this is another kind of sensor which I'll be discussing later. And this is the same device, which is, you can see, kind of a top view kind of thing. And you can correlate with a 1 rupee coin, which has become kind of hibernation these days, but still we can kind of compare it. So before I begin, let me just brag about our lab. So it's a very quick video about our lab, what we do and so on, kind of summary, which we made for a funding agency a couple of years back. So lab has really evolved since then as well. You can see a few 3D printers here, which we use them quite a bit. This is an inkjet printer, which you can see here. So yeah, so we have people from different departments and different kind of capabilities, and we are successfully implementing many projects. We have postdoctoral fellow, lab technicians, several PhD scholars, and both part-time and full-time. And we have been working primarily on sensor development and some of the energy harvesters. But majority of them are micro scale or milli scale, I would say, for various applications, and some of them I will try to show it to you today. Currently, we are supported by different funding agencies like ICMR, Department of Health Research, DSIR, DST, and so on. And they have their own mandate, their own particular project we are working on. So in terms of perspective about 3D printed sensors, I always try to begin with some of the big picture. So if we can go back to history, and around 250 years ago, there was an invention of steam, and that really paved the way to develop newer thought process, newer mechanism, so that society and people at large can be benefited. So the invention of steam has created the power or weaving loom and so on. Believe me, this industry 1.0 was not existing there. I mean, that name people have given now to that time when they say that it was industry 1.0. Then came the invention of electricity around 100 years later or 90 years later, which helped to start mass production, assembly line, and of course, the power to all the households. Then in 1969, or maybe a little before that, when Bell Labs and IBM has incepted the idea of integrated circuits, which definitely changed the way we look at things, especially from the electronics perspective. And last but not the least, we call about what we have today is the internet era, cyber physical system. So people have started calling the today's era as Industry 4.0, and that's why they started calling IEC era as 3.0, electricity era as 2.0, and the steam era as 1.0. So it is extremely important that whatever we do, whatever we make today, we always see from the lenses of internet, cyber physical system, so that the work which is being done today or by us or by a given lab, it is benefited to the society at large. And of course, it has many more benefits. So we'll be talking about how these smart sensors can be developed or has been developed, and how the current niche about Industry 4.0 has been integrated into these systems. So I love these pictures, these 4 black and white pictures. And those of you who would like to participate, they can certainly answer, except my own students who are here, because they know about these pictures quite a bit. So these pictures essentially talk about what was the industry around 150 to 200 years ago. So as you can see that these are not just photo edited black and white pictures, these are real black and white pictures. See, the top left is more of a textile industry. The top right is more of a automobile industry. The bottom left is say biomedical industry, and bottom right is like a solar thermal system. So one thing which you can see is that if you can take an example of automobiles, things are not automated. Every model, every piece was different, so that you cannot really verify, you cannot really benchmark each every piece. But now I'm sure we all know how things have become automated, reliable, size, accurate, so that each and every bit is same. But if you buy one model of one particular car, I'm sure you all know that they will be same, except the color, of course. So the need for today is we need to work in accuracy, cost, or time, or maybe two of them or all of them. So I somehow use this acronym quite a bit, ACT technology, and that's where the 3D printing interventions has really helped to be able to develop some of the smart devices. This is one kind of device which we have developed around 7 to 8 years ago when the 3D printed was booming in our country. And this was fabricated by a simple stereolithography printer. And that time, I remember 2013, we bought this printer for around 4 lakh rupees, which was quite expensive in what we can get today. So you can see that we can create a simple matter-free device with the serpentine channels, 2 inlets and 1 outlet, and we can create this device in 15 to 20 minutes. And of course, it costs a couple of rupees, of course, in terms of the consumable cost. So this evolution, as I said, that it will continue. It has continued as we have been seeing for last 150 years, and this will continue. There is no end to it. And whatever we see tomorrow, this cyber physical system, as I mentioned, will certainly help to be able to develop more smart and more user-friendly and more portable devices. That is why we can call it as an ACT technology. But how? So I'm sure that in terms of accuracy, at least for last 1 year, we have been seeing the way the world is changing. You need to have a device which can accurately monitor or detect the virus which is available possibly or impossibly in our body. So accuracy is certainly extremely important. You are able to detect the virus V1, not the virus V2. And not only you are able to detect virus V1, but also accurately, so that the clinical practitioner or the doctor can certainly decide the course of action in terms of treatment. Whether it is dengue or whether it is fuel adulteration, it has to be accurate. It has to be accurate, affordable too. Affordability, of course, comes at different stages, because if it is an extremely urgent scenario, the accuracy might be more important than the affordability. And finally, the result should be fast. So that is why these technologies are extremely important, where the accuracy, cost, and time plays an important role. But to give you my thoughts about the current scenario, if you think about when we were sitting in March 2020, everybody was talking about detection, right? But now everybody talks about vaccine. Of course, we are going to a second stage, I believe. But 1 year ago, people were talking about detection. But how the detection should be? The detection should be having a very different virtues, like it should be rapid, as I said before, specific, it should not be non-interfering. We can develop possibly a prototype, and of course, cost effective it should be. I wrote cost effectiveness on the extreme right side, because depending on the severity of the problem, the cost will take the prominence. So detection has to have these things, whether we are talking about detection of viral or any other per se. So just to give you 2 quick pictures, which I really like. So in terms of detection, there are 2 methods, and I'm sure everybody has become an expert of the viral detection now, at least for the namesake. We all know that there is something called RT-PCR. I mean, we see this word at least 100 times if you control F any electronic copy of a newspaper, right? So we all know what is RT-PCR. So you can give your sample and you can get the test done in maybe few hours, if not 1 hour, at least 6 to 8 hours. And of course, antibody test, which we all know that it was earlier very popular, or people used to take it, but now later on RT-PCR become more prominent. But having said that, in place of 8 hours to 10 hours, where the doctors has to wait to start the diagnosis, it is extremely important to develop a test which can give an answer in a matter of tens of minutes or so. That is why a lot of people are working on it, including us, to be able to develop a device which can give an answer within 10 to 20 minutes. And of course, the antibody test can be done within a matter of week. Okay. So, so what are the unique cell proposition? So I did not end my story. So to be able to develop such devices, 3D printing can or has really played an important role, and I'll show you how. So what are the unique cell proposition? Well, this is not my class, but still, those of you who are from college, the micro devices are extremely important, because I'm sure you have heard these words in your class 8 to class 9. surface area of a sphere or volume of a sphere. But this is important, which we might not have thought about it. Surface to volume ratio is 3/r. So when you bring down the size of a device, the surface which is available to you for further reaction increases, and that will give you a huge leeway to carry on many reactions. You can see from certain examples like grain dust when you use on Diwali. I mean, Diwali, when you basically hit on the wall, it booms. And similarly, like the ground salt, it dissolves much faster. And also, why the ant flies, not the elephant. So these are some of the fundamentals which we all need to sort of understand and remember, so that we can digest about the micro devices and their importance. So to be able to develop a sensor or any micro scale device, there are 4 basic steps to follow. You take any project, even if you are trying to hit a nail onto the wall, you always make a design either on a piece of paper or in your mind. So likewise, if you want to start a sensor development or any new project, you first start with design simulation. You find the most appropriate way to fabricate the device. Then you also find out the best possible way to detect the output from the device. And of course, you have to test and characterize them. So these are some of the different fabrication methods which I have sort of noted down in this particular column. But depending on those things, accuracy, cost, and time, I mean, there may be many more parameters, but probably we can sort of place other parameters in one of these 3 categories. So depending on what are you looking at, you can sort of decide which fabrication method one has to use. But in this particular discussion, I'll be more focusing on 3D printing. And similarly, detection, it can be optical, light-based detection. If you don't want to see images or light, you can sort of think about electrical-based detection, electrochemical, or electrochemiluminescence-based. So just to give you some of the economical scenario. So these sensors have become quite prevalent since the smartphone wave and this wave about the cyber physical system, which is here. And also the sensors have huge market, and if you can see various application domains, you can see that how these sensors play an important role for various kind of application domain itself. And also they have a huge career opportunity, especially for students who have joined this talk. So they will sort of like the fact that a lot of design engineers, a lot of software tool developers primarily are coming out of our country. And of course, because we do not have the typical fab lab in India, that is being outsourced primarily if you are talking about clean room based fabrication. But when we talk about these sensors, which is simple, inexpensive sensor, that huge work is being done in India itself. Yeah. So what is the 3D printing process? So I'm sure that many of us have heard about the subtractive manufacturing process, especially the clean room based process. So what you do is that you start with a big chunk of material, and then you subtract the material. You sort of try to take away the part or unwanted part which you don't want by using lithography or e-beam lithography or various other methods which are available, and you find a project, you get a project. However, in 3D printing, you start with smaller material and then you keep on adding it on top of it by layer. You still get the same object at the end, but the interesting part is that you have a budget in terms of the material you are using in terms of your device fabrication, right? That is the interesting part. However, that does not make it all good in comparison to subtractive manufacturing. Of course, this field is still nurturing. This field is quite new. You may not be able to get as small feature size as you can easily get by the clean room based process, like a fraction of microns or even nanometer. You may not get such small scale features by using such additive manufacturing process. Right? There are many 3D printing process or additive manufacturing and 3D printing are called or can be considered as a replaceable manner, but I will not really discuss them today. But one of the first historical evidence of 3D printing came in 1984 when this gentleman Chris Houle invented this machine. And the idea behind 3D printing is that you first create a 3D CAD model, and I'm sure that all of us have used it or in the process to use it. And interesting part is that just by 3D CAD model, you convert into a compatible file. And one of the most important component of 3D printing is slicing it. So depending on the type of 3D printer you have, depending on the resolution of the 3D printer, you slice it. For example, for each layer, you can go say 50 microns or 100 microns and so on. So depending on the shape you are providing, you can chop it into many, many slices. For example, this height of this model is say 1 mm, and your layer size is 50 microns. So you can easily slice it into 20 layers, right? So each layer will give me one particular fabrication step. And then you 3D print it and you get the project, you get the object. That is a simple process, and everything is done more or less software based. Only thing is that unlike the photolithography where you have to focus a lot on fabrication, optimization of fabrication method, you need to work a lot on modeling or developing design. The design is crucial. Design takes the most amount of time. So design, slicing, printing, that's it. Like you print on a A4 sheet, you control F it, control P it, and then you print it, right? So similarly, you can control P it and print it. That's it, because you have done the designing and slicing in your software itself. So as simple as that. So there are two popular methods for 3D printing. One is called as the fused deposition modeling, which is based on these tubings. And those of you who have used them, these are either 1.75 mm or 2.84 mm diameter, very well standard across the globe. And then interesting fact is that depending on where you want to dispense these filaments, they call it filament in popular culture, what happens is that they get heated. Depending on the glass transition temperature, they get dispensed and they get solidified immediately. And that's how you can keep on building these structures on top of each other. So you can see that you can dispense it and you can solidify it. I think I'll skip it because I want to spend more time on my application. So there are many materials which can be used, and there are different kinds of glass transition temperature which are mentioned here. Let's not worry too much about it. And those of you who would like to have a copy of this presentation, I'll be happy to provide because I'm skipping many slides. And the second method, which is extremely popular, is called stereolithography. And it is very much similar to, I would say, photolithography, because over there also you use epoxy and then you cure it at the UV. So similar way you use the stereolithography as well. So just to give you a quick snapshot of it, so you can see that this is my very famous Formlab stereolithography. So you sort of fill the tank with epoxy, and depending on design, you can sort of suck away the part which you would like to fabricate out of 3D printing. So you can dispense it.
The build platform is lowered into the resin, leaving only a thin layer of liquid in between platform and the bottom of the frame. Galvanometers direct the UV laser through a transparent window at the bottom of the resin tank, drawing a cross-section of the 3D model and selectively hardening the material. The print is built in consecutive layers, each less than 100 microns thick. When a layer is complete, part is kept at the bottom of the tank, letting fresh resin flow beneath, and the platform is lowered once again. Originally developed in the 80s, SLA was confined to large industrial machines until recently.
It's now this is done. So if you would like to compare lithography, I'm primarily talking about the positive points only. So you can see that there are a lot of advantages also because it's a very well established technique and you can easily handle it. But there are several limitations. The limitations comes from some of the challenges and the tardy process which you have. And somehow, up to some extent, such challenges can be sorted out by the 3D printing method, which we are talking today. So it is said that in 3D printing, innovation is in design, not in real chip. And there is no hard connections, no Siltex, which you can say probably. And yeah, no IP infringement. Your innovation entirely lies on the design. So you can sort of, there are many companies which are, even in Hyderabad also there are many companies, you can just email them and they will fabricate a device and ship it back to you. And those of you who would like to do some academic collaboration, we can also do it for you. And then you can see that this is very recently I have taken a screenshot from Amazon website. You can see that you can buy a very nice 3D printer as inexpensive as 15,000 rupees. Also, there are many 3D printing pens which are available in the market. You can certainly gift to your kids or some other way, whatever you want to do. And many such pens are available. You can nicely create designs and so on. So, which is another fancy thing which is available. And these are some of the 3D printers which are available in our campus, and many of them are available in the labs. And we have 3D printers which are based on both the filament based as well as the epoxy based. Now I'll spend the next 10 minutes on the one of the case studies, which is the micro viscometer, which has been developed with the help of 3D printing technology. So one of the first thing which an engineer would like to know is why we are doing that, why we are developing a viscometer. And I'm sure many of you would also have this question in your mind. So just to tell you that there are many real-world problems like fuel adulteration. I'm sure that this is a huge market or huge discussion which we have, milk adulteration, and then a lot of discussions on blood parameter measurements. Right? But there are many challenges, and these challenges are quite common, whether you talk about fuel adulteration, milk adulteration, or even the biomedical applications. One of the common parameters of these applications I have just mentioned is the viscosity. If you are able to measure the viscosity, you should be able to find out whether the fuel is adulterated or milk is adulterated, or you should be able to find out or measure various blood parameters. And we can certainly use the microfluidic concept to do that. So that's why we are trying to develop a microfluidic viscometer, which can help us to be able to solve some of these problems. So as an engineer, one of the first things is that what is the equation, right? How do we develop the device, and what is the fundamental equation? This is a very simple equation. Those of you who have some mechanical, they must have come across this equation. Viscosity depends, if you have a microchannel for a microfluidic device with a width of 2W and velocity of V, and the pressure difference delta P, and the length is L, which is hiding here. So you can find out the viscosity will be something like this. As simple as that. So if you would like to develop a device, there are 4 unknowns on the right side. So make 3 unknowns known and keep 1 as unknown. Simple, as simple as that. So you can create a device based on this simple mathematical concept. So initially we started with the optofluidic viscometer, where we are trying to understand the width taken by 2 fluids. One on one side is a reference fluid, and which is a known viscosity, and test fluid with an unknown viscosity, right? And based on the images, we can find out the viscosity of a reference fluid. But however, that is something which is not feasible on the fuel stations or dairy farms. So we cannot take your microscope everywhere. So that's why we thought about developing an electrofluidic viscometer, where we can sort of find out one of the electrical output, which will be the indicator for viscosity. So again, same equation, we have tried to twist it in this format, where if we have a known distance between electrodes, as you can see, there are 5 vertical electrodes and 1 horizontal electrodes. So if you know the distance between the 2 electrodes, and if we can find the time the fluid will take to hit 2 consecutive electrodes, we can find out the viscosity, right? As simple as that. So we try to understand how we can use them in our devices. So this is a simple device which we have fabricated out of CNC. This is acrylic, not 3D printing. And we created a Y-shaped microchannel. Later on, we have created this device. Again, you cannot see it because it's not very transparent. This is also a 3D printed device which we have created later. And we have tried to understand how this can be used to be able to find the unknown viscosity. So you can see that this is another device with 2 inlets and 1 outlet. Again, 3D printed device. And we have tried to flow the liquid and then use the image processing to be able to find the viscosity. But later on, I'll skip that, but later on, we have tried to make things much simpler. We have tried to use a device out of paper, as I have shown you here. So it's a slightly different design, which I have in my hand. But the whole idea was that if the fluid is flowing from top to bottom, the whole idea was to find the time the fluid will take to cover a known distance. That's it. So because of the inherent capillaries, fluid will form. and the borders are made of wax. We have used some of the simple methods to create this wax boundaries, and very, very simple design. And we can see there are two very crude electrodes which were there, one of the first or initial experiments which were developed. And then this is another device which we have created, and which can again be used to be able to measure the viscosity. So, and then because we are using wax quite a bit, so there are several fluids which has some adverse reactions with the wax. So we may not be able to use these devices for those fluids. So we thought to use, and by the way, these wax are injected by 3D printing only. There is a special filament called PCL. I don't remember the full form right now, but you can Google it and find out. So what we did, we just 3D print this filament on top of it and heat it so that this PCL material goes on the other side. So we have a nice boundary of the wax. So when we flow the fluid, it does not diverge away from the channel which you see in front of you. And then we have created a real 3D printed device so that we can find out the unknown viscosity by using a simple relations. So the idea was simple. You have a microchannel, straight microchannel, and we have 4 intersecting electrodes. And the idea was that we need to know the distance between the 2 consecutive electrodes. And we have to use some microprocessor to complete the automation process, and also to know the time between the 2 consecutive electrodes. So this is something, a conceptual design which we have developed: microchannel, electrical contacts, microprocessor, and the overall device development. So again, for the 3D printed device, we have done a lot of permutations and combinations to find out what is the best scenario for such paper-based devices, what kind of design and shape of the inlet, what kind of color of the wax we can use, and so on. There are many parameters which we have tried to use to come to some best possible parameter. And you can see that this is a simple overall circuit. Of course, power supply has to be there, which we later miniaturized it, but just a simple device can possibly measure the viscosity. And as you can see, I have been keep on showing you this again and again. So this is a final 3D printed device, and which you can certainly keep it in your hand, like 2 inch by 2 inch by 2 inch. And by this device, you can just inject your sample from here, and the sample will flow, and you can measure the viscosity. As you can see that, again, CPS, I told you in the beginning. So it is connected through Bluetooth or IoT to a smartphone. And the smartphone not only captures the data, but also provides the power, which is required to run those microprocessors, which are underneath this box, actually. So now how do we use that? So we have used them to understand the protein detection. Lysozyme is a very popular protein. And interestingly, what we have done, we have tried to heat the protein, and based on discussion with the biologists, we found that when you denature the protein, and when you before denaturing the protein, the viscosity changes, and we have tried to correlate with the way the denaturization is sensed in a conventional manner. So what we have done, we use the protein, we heat them, and we put it in the in here, and we try to measure the viscosity. So before denaturation, after denaturation, what is the difference in terms of viscosity? So basically, protein is suddenly binder. When you heat it, it unfolds, and of course changes the viscosity. So in many applications, the unfolding or folding of protein is extremely important to understand. Similarly, the albumin, the bovine serum albumin was studied, and we have also studied human saliva for various samples, and how the human saliva is changing and how it is indicating for some other effects, which is not certainly shown in this particular slide. Later on, we have used another method like image processing method. But again, because again the 3D printed device has some limitations, whereby it cannot be used to measure the viscosity of automobiles, because the automobile does react with the 3D printed polymers and so on. So again, we have used the image processing method. Again, these boundaries were all 3D printed, and by using these image processing and finding out the region of interest, we can find out the viscosity. So this is the whole device, which is here. You can see the 3D printed paper device can be just placed here, and after completing the complete algorithm of image processing, you can find out the viscosity. All right, and same kind of experiments have been done to complete the proof of principle of such devices, right? So the whole idea was to completely replace the current Ostwald viscometer. I'm sure those of you who have done some chemistry or who have some flavor of chemistry, they must have come across this Ostwald viscometer. So it has the U-shape kind of structure, and the way is that they try to measure time the fluid takes to suck from the lower mark to the upper mark, and the time is an indicator of the viscosity, right? So same thing we have tried to mimic in our 3D printed device. As I showed you before, that we have a microchannel and we have intersecting electrodes. The only thing is that you have to find out the time the fluid will take to cover the neighboring electrodes, and that will again be an indicator of the viscosity, like I have shown for the Ostwald viscometer. So you can see this is a nice little 3D printed device. And interesting part is that the black part is a graphene, is a conductive Jones, and the other parts, of course, non-conductive, made by other polymers. And the device may cost few rupees or so on, and the time it takes around 10 to 20 minutes. And you can see that the entire this is a lab-based prototype, which again has very messy electronics and so on. And then we were able to measure the viscosity of some of the chemicals, some of the regularly used fluids, as you can see here. And later on, we have tried to integrate some of the bulky parts like power supply, like pumps, and so on into a small box, and thereby the 3D printed device can be made plug in and out and to complete the whole process. So again, a lot of circuitry, a lot of internal work has been done, which I don't really want to discuss. And a lot of other parameters have been optimized, like the flow rate, the Reynolds number, and so on, to be able to build in this optimized 3D printed viscometer. Now you can see that this device is in the current shape, where the whole device will be around 6" by 4" kind of thing. And we can have a plug-and-play 3D printer, and it has an inbuilt pump. So the entire housing has been developed in the lab and, of course, in the workshop to be able to create this 3D printed viscometer. And we can sort of set up the timing, running, priming, everything is there. And we have tested them for several applications. Yeah, so this is something I just thought to share with you, that we have tried to develop 3 different versions of viscometer. The 3D printed device, which is entirely 3D printed, including the pumps, including the circuitry and packaging and so on. And the second one was again the 3D printed paper-based device. And finally, the image processing-based 3D printer, which has been tried for many applications. So this is about 3D printer, 3D printed viscometer. But our lab has been working on other applications too, where we try to use a 3D printed device for several applications. Really, I'll try to sum it up in the next few minutes, if you permit me, Professor Prempal. Is that okay? Or
yes, please. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes. So yeah, so there are a few more examples I just thought to put forward in front of you. So we have been working quite a bit about the biofuel cells. So fuel cells, I'm sure we all know, fuel cells are chemical devices which has the electrodes and electrolyte. That's it. So as you can see, this particular device, it has electrodes, cathode, anode, and electrolyte, which can sort of suck from this side, and it can go towards the waste, towards the absorbent pad. Right? And this device, you can see, it's all 3D printed. Of course, all these carriers are made of paper, so paper can be used as a absorbent pad as well as the carrier, which can sort of carry the electrolyte altogether. So one of the device which I can show it to you, I don't have it right now, but maybe something like this you can see. Of course, this is not exactly what you are seeing on the screen right now, but you can see that there are 2 inlets and there are 2 sets of electrodes. And of course, these are the waste. Waste somehow it is still made in split channels, but it doesn't necessarily need to be split. So, and later on, we have tried to create various paper-based devices, and they are sort of stacked together. And the whole idea was to increase the power output from these devices so that we can use them for certain applications. And again, this is the soft lithographically made devices. And later on, this is interesting. This is the paper-based 3D printed device, and you can see that I will show it to you just now. These are the two different configurations which were 3D printed. On one side we have anode, and other side we have cathode, and you can see that whole device was 3D printed, including the electrodes. And later on, you can sort of kind of clip them together, and you can also appreciate the fact that the device has two inlets. One you can see here, one you can see here, and there's a one waste. Waste is somewhere here. So basically, this whole device can be 3D printed and can nicely be used for power harvesting applications. In this particular case, we are using simple pencils as the electrode because they're made of graphite. And in this case, this is something like this, which I just showed to you. And this is another design. Of course, it's not 3D printed per se, but this is another design I just showed to you, something like this. And beyond the glucose fuel cell, which I showed you in the previous slide, we have been also working on microbial fuel cell, because microbes itself are the huge potential, have the huge potential to power up many devices. And we again use some of these CPS-based mechanism to be able to generate the power, and not only generate the power, but send it to the cloud. And then we have been working on some other chemical fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells, and try to see if we can generate enough power to power some of the electronic devices and some of the consumer electronic devices as well. We have been focusing a lot on electrochemical sensing platforms. And when we talk about electrochemical sensing platform, one of the niche which is a requirement is the 3-electrode system. So we have tried to develop various 3-electrode systems, as you can see here. Again, completely 3D printed device, which has the micro reactor where we can inject the analyte. And these 3 electrodes will work like 3 different electrodes which are required, or which are the inherent component of the electrochemical system. And likewise, I can show you another electrochemical devices which we have developed, sensing devices. And this is another version of the device which we have developed for other kind of sensing. So a lot of work is being done to create such electrochemical devices for various detection and monitoring applications, including the supercapacitor development as well. And next is the electrochemiluminescence platform. The good point about the electrochemiluminescence platform is that you need to sort of provide a small voltage across these 2 electrodes, and here your analyte will be there. So based on the voltage which is applied, chemical reaction take place and it generates the luminescence. And we can capture this luminescence by a simple smartphone. This whole device is like 6 inch by 4 inch by 4 inch, something like that. And the whole circuitry is housed here. An interesting feature is that we are using the smartphone to apply the voltage I just mentioned, but also to process the images, the luminescence images which we are getting out of it. So we have been trying to use them for various detection, monitoring applications, including the nutrients, biosensing applications, so on. As you can see, that this is one particular device which is housed here, and this is one device which is housed here. Moving on, some work which we're trying to do to try to understand how the nitrite can be detected. And later on, we are trying to extend this work to detect the phosphorus and potassium, so that we can detect the entire range of NPK from the soil. So this device which we have created, which has the inbuilt syringe pump and a color-based detection mechanism, which can be used for a color-based colorimetric assay of nitrogen. So basically, when the nitrogen concentration changes, the color changes, and so on. So this device has also been 3D printed, and again, we have casted the polymer and to be able to complete the entire device. Yeah, as you can see that this device is extended to measure the pH value as conductivity as well. Yeah, so now we have a very miniaturized device which is popularly used for very simple, in a simple manner, how it can be used for phosphorus as well as nitrite detection. I think last 1 or 2 things I would like to show before I conclude. This is something which is quite a new domain which we are trying to work on. This is a nasal plug which we are trying to develop, and this nasal plug has the HEPA filters to sort of filter out the the pollutants, as well as it has the electrodes. The idea of the electrodes is that we can electrochemically sense some of the specific pollutants and specific external entities. So this device can be used for both as a filter as well as the detector. And as I told you, some work which we have been doing on the DNA amplification. So we have been trying to develop a device, as I have shown the initial set of my devices, my slides, that how the simple devices can be used for DNA amplification. This device has been used for nanomaterial synthesis, but our work on DNA amplification is still under review. Yeah. So just to summarize, this last 1 minute I will take. I have tried to share with you some of the perspective of these 3D printed sensors and some of the USP in terms of the development mechanism of these sensors. I try to show you one example of viscosity meter, and finally try to reflect upon some of the other applications where 3D printing has been used for various sensing and monitoring applications. I'll skip that. Yeah, I think these are some of the. So these are some of the PhD scholars which we have in our lab. As you can see that one or all of them are working either in sensing or energy harvesting scenario. But we have a diversity of projects, fortunately, and we have during the course of the work and course of the projects, we have tried to develop various facilities which can be used for fabrication, characterization, and different testing and so on. And we also have a small clean room in our institute, around 600 square feet or so on, whereby we can do the wet etching or the complete range of photolithography, including the metallization and probing and so on. So I just thought to share a quick video about the clean room as well. So we have so yeah, so we can I just thought to bring this slide. I know we are rushing up, but there are a lot of sub projects, a lot of miniaturized development which are taking place. And as I told you, with the course of the project which we are having, there are a lot of work has been done to not only fabricate, design the devices, but also to develop a turnkey device, and thereby we need projects like power boosters, some of the IoT bit integration. And to be able to miniaturize the devices, we might need to work upon developing some of the measurement tools like potentiostat and spectrophotometer. So we are trying to look for some more collaboration where we can seek some support to develop some of the other parts of the project which we are not really expert right now. So I would like to acknowledge some of the collaborators in India and abroad, and as well as the funding agencies who have been kind enough to support our work. And I would request you to please feel free to call us or email us. I'm sure when visit will be possible, we'll be definitely invite all of you to be able to visit our lab. And we are even ready to give you hands-on training. We have done it in the past, or any other way we can help. We'll be extremely happy and extremely open to be able to give training or any way we can help all of you. So thank you very much. This is our team. And I would like to thank all the team members and all the participants who are patiently listening to me. I exceeded more than what I promised, but I'll be happy to answer some of the questions which you might have. And before I conclude, I thank ISS chapter of Hyderabad, Professor Prempal, Professor Pandey, and others for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sanket, for excellent talk. Now talk is open for question. I think one question that Dr. Ashok Pandey asked, which printer do you use? I think you have already explained all these things. He asked in the very beginning.
Okay.
And so another question from Majumdar. Can you please ask your question?
No, sir, that was just a clarification. If TCL was a polycaprolactone, or was it film thermal?
This is absolutely correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, please unmute and ask the question. So there is no need to type right now.
Yeah, Dr. Sanket Goel, I have a query. It was a nice presentation, and your students, you have got wonderful products developed. I'm curious if any of these products have risen to the level of a product which the industry or probably a diagnostic center could straight away use for some blood sample or diabetes test or